Let's bring on the Mountaineers. Goes around about the 50, the 10 to 5. A touchdown with Virginia. He did it. He did it.
That's with White. Beavers and he's gone. Touchdown. Tavon Austin.
As the hills of West Virginia resound with the sounds of Golden Blue football.
They want to have a 7-on-7 drill. We want to make it a fist fight. Nothing cheap, nothing dirty, but West Virginia football.
From the heart. Streaming. It's Mountaineer pride.
Once a Mountaineer, always a Mountaineer.
Leave no doubt tonight. No doubt. They shouldn't have played the old Golden Blue.
West Virginia is a special place. People of the state that have great pride in this WV logo.
Ain't no stopping the Golden Blue.
It is a great night to be a Mountaineer wherever you may be.
And now it's the show brought to you by Mountaineer fans for Mountaineer fans, the Country Roads Webcast. What's going on, Mountaineer Nation? Welcome into episode 179 of the CRW podcast here for our Oklahoma preview and predictions as the Mountaineers get set to head to Norman for a very important night game that has implications within the Big 12 conference title race, and we're glad to see West Virginia still involved in that here, getting into the latter portion of November, still playing important football games, and they have perhaps the most important one here in recent memory coming up this Saturday night. So we'll get into breaking that game down against the Sooners and provide our prediction as to if the Mountaineers will come away with a win, and we'll also take a look around the conference and provide some predictions for other games happening around the Big 12 here this week in Week 10 of the college football season. But before we do all that, let's lead this episode off the way we always like to, and that's, of course, with a little bit of Mountaineer news. All right, leading off Mountaineer news this week, some of you all probably have seen this already, but wanted to recap the Players of the Week provided by the team for the win over BYU. We know when West Virginia has their victories, they provide their Players of the Week. So if you're watching this on the video side, I'll share it on the screen. You can see these names, but I'll read it out for you guys that are tuned in on the audio side. But as I mentioned that, want to say appreciate you guys tuning in this episode. Either way that you choose to do so, you can find the video version, of course, on the Country Roads Webcast YouTube or on the web there at wvsportsnow.com, and we're very appreciative of them and being a part of the Sports Now family of networks. If you're tuned into that version, do us a favor, hit that thumbs up button, give us a like. Really helps this video's performance, which in turn helps future videos' performances as well. And if you're a West Virginia fan, Big 12 fan, college football fan, be sure hit that subscribe button. Helps us, helps you, helps get more of this Mountaineer sports content out to Mountaineer Nation. And if you are listening on the audio side, you can find that on any podcast platform you like: Apple Podcasts, Google Podcasts, Spotify, Amazon Music, iHeartRadio, you name it. Just search for us there, Country Roads Webcast. And you can leave us a rating and review to help us on that side, or just share us around with other Mountaineer fans you may know. We always appreciate that. But getting into the Players of the Week here for West Virginia in that dominant 37-7 win over BYU last week, the offensive lineman of the week was Zach Frazier, of course. No big surprise there with the good performance that he put on. Special teams player of the week, Austin Brinkman, who's done a phenomenal job being the long snapper this year for the West Virginia football team. Defensive player of the week, Anthony Wilson, thought he played his best game since he transferred in from Georgia Southern there at the cat safety position. Offensive player of the week, Jaheim White, standout performance from the true freshman. Hoping to see more of that from him over these final 3 weeks of the season. The Juice Award, of course, providing the energy there on the sidelines, goes to Nate Flower. Blue Collar Award that they give to the hardest worker of the week, Brandon Yates. And, of course, not surprised to see him win that one either. I believe he played 3 different positions in the game, getting some time at guard, tackle, and snapping some at center late when West Virginia had their reserves in there. So he grabs one of West Virginia's 4 Blue Collar Awards this week. The other Blue Collar Award winners were Preston Fox, Jalen Thornton, and Ben Cutter. And how about Ben Cutter? He certainly is working hard, really starting to come into his own there on the defensive side. And then on the scout team offensive player of the week was Sean Boyle, the true freshman quarterback, the only other scholarship quarterback on the roster that's not Nico and GG. And then on the defensive side, the scout team player of the week the scout team special teams player of the week was Derek Burlitz. Moving on here in Mountaineer news, always like to share the kick time for West Virginia's next game that is upcoming on the schedule, of course, here in Mountaineer news on these preview podcast episodes. And for the third consecutive week, actually, the Big 12 has utilized the 6-day window for West Virginia's upcoming game. We saw the prior 2 weeks that resulted, of course, in night games against BYU and Oklahoma. We'll see how it turns out against Cincinnati, but we will have to wait until this Sunday to find out when West Virginia will be playing Cincinnati as they return home back to Morgantown for the final game of the West Virginia football season at home. It will be senior day for that matchup against Cincinnati, and we'll find out just what time that kicks later this weekend after West Virginia plays Oklahoma. And in regards to that game against Oklahoma, just wanted to wrap Mountaineer news here with a bit of an injury update. No, West Virginia had a couple players out on the offensive side for that game against BYU, those being Doug Nestor along the offensive line, and we were hoping to finally have the full strength offensive line back for the first time in a long time for West Virginia if they can get Doug Nestor back for this game against Oklahoma. But at this time, that remains questionable as to if that will be the case. But we do have a bit more of a positive update on the status of Hudson Clement, the West Virginia wide receiver that is super explosive, was leading the nation in yards per reception prior to his injury, and we're hoping to see him come back, and it seems like we will finally get to see that this weekend against Oklahoma. Seems like he will be available, barring any surprising setbacks here over the next 24 hours. Looks like we'll see Hudson Clement return to the West Virginia offense. So bit of positive news there on the injury side as we wrap up Mountaineer news here. And now let's dive into this important game against the Sooners as we talk matchups, provide our key to victory and score prediction here on episode 179 of the CRW podcast. All right, Mountaineer Nation, here we are with our main segment here on episode 179, getting into our Oklahoma preview and prediction portion here. And this is one that obviously needs no introduction, right? It's the Sooners. This is a big one for West Virginia. It has been since we joined the Big 12. We kept waiting to get over that hump. Last season, we finally did so. And now this season, we have a chance to not only beat them for the first time in Norman since we played them in the Big 12, but beat them in Norman for the first time since 1982. So obviously, those storylines alone are massive enough. And then you can obviously add in the fact that West Virginia still has a chance, an outside chance to make the Big 12 title game, but all of those chances go away if you don't win this one over Oklahoma. So it's just a huge game in regards to the standings here within the Big 12 conference. And of course, West Virginia wants to finally beat Oklahoma in Norman before they head off to the SEC. This is your final chance to do that with them being a conference foe. And who knows if you'll ever get to play in Norman again following this game. So certainly there's plenty of storylines there that should be motivating West Virginia going into this one. But unfortunately, Oklahoma is probably going to come into this game motivated as well, coming off of 2 straight losses following a 7-0 start to the season, as both teams now will come into this contest with 2 conference losses, both sitting at 4-2 within the Big 12. But West Virginia is 6-3 overall in the season, where Oklahoma is 7-2 overall and actually sitting number 17 in the national rankings there. So West Virginia has a chance to earn a top 25 win, and of course what would be a signature win for Neil Brown. Of course, the game is taking place 7:00 p.m. night game there in Norman. It's going to be televised yet again on Fox. Second straight week, West Virginia is in that exact slot. This week, you have Jeff Levering and Mark Helfrich on the call announcing the game there on Fox. ESPN giving West Virginia only an 11% chance to win this game. Oklahoma an 89% chance according to their predictor. And Vegas certainly seems to favor the Sooners as well. At the time of this recording, West Virginia is currently a 13-point underdog in this game against Oklahoma. So more factors there that West Virginia can look to for motivation. That seems to be something they've done at times this season. Neil Brown's tried to find things to motivate this team, and he won't have to look far in this one to see West Virginia have plenty of cases for motivation. I've already ran through a few of those just in the opening getting into this game, including the fact that West Virginia hasn't won there since 1982. So that's just a bit of a prologue for this game. Let's get into the individual matchups here. Let's start off with the Oklahoma offense against the West Virginia defense, because this is one to watch. The Oklahoma offense has been very explosive this season under offensive coordinator Jeff Lebby, now in his second season. After leading the Big 12 in total yards last year, they really kind of picked up where they left off, and Dylan Gabriel has been phenomenal for them for a big portion of this season. He was a Heisman candidate and one of the leading Heisman candidates for a major portion of this season, and rightfully so with the way that he has played. He has accounted for the most touchdowns in the Big 12 conference this season and is also top 10 in completion percentage nationally, and has a chance to break the Oklahoma season record for highest completion percentage ever. He's on track to do that right now, completing over 71% of his passes, and he has 3 really good receivers that West Virginia will have to worry about on that side. The redshirt freshman wide receiver for them, Nick Anderson, leads the nation in yards per reception. I mentioned Hudson Clement was leading in that category prior to his injury earlier this season, and since his injury occurred, Nick Anderson has really taken over that statistic there as he leads the nation now in yards per reception, and he also leads the Big 12 in receiving touchdowns with 8 on the year. He's a big play threat West Virginia will have to account for. And then Mr. Consistency, though, for Oklahoma, I think, is obviously Drake Stoops. They're in his 6th season now with the Sooners, began his career as a walk-on. He's had big games versus West Virginia in the past, and he's really having the best season that he's had throughout his collegiate career ever to this point. He is 2nd in the Big 12 in receptions with 52 and 3rd in the conference in touchdown catches with 6 on the season. He's coming off a big game in their Bedlam loss there where he had 12 catches for 134 yards. But then I mentioned there's 3 receivers, and the third one there is super explosive, and he's a guy that really is a threat when he gets the ball in his hands. He almost has a running back type body. I'm a Carolina Panthers fan, so I've seen a guy like a Laviska Shenault, and that's kind of who Jalil Farouk reminds me of for Oklahoma. He leads the team in yards, actually. So you see 3 different receivers. They're all leading in different ways. Nick Anderson, the big play threat, leading in touchdowns with 8. Stoops leads in receptions. And then you get Farouk leading the team in yardage with 547, which is good for 9th in the Big 12 conference. So top 10 there in the conference in receiving yardage. He's also the team's kick return weapon and can do damage there for the Sooners. Also, as far as the Oklahoma running game is concerned, obviously, when I mentioned Dylan Gabriel, he can hurt you with his legs as well, has over 250 rushing yards on the season to go along with his explosiveness in the passing game. Tyree Walker is the leading rusher for the Sooners on the season with 444 yards. But here in recent weeks, freshman running back Gavin Sawchuk seems like he's really coming on, and I think that they may start to lean towards him a bit more as this season progresses here towards the end. He's really looked good, including in the game there in Bedlam in their most recent contest, had 111 yards on only 13 carries. So look for him to get some action in the backfield for this game for Oklahoma. So that's just kind of something that West Virginia will have to look to do, is stop that explosive Oklahoma offense. And it's something that West Virginia's struggled to do, and a reason they've struggled against the Sooners in their Big 12 matchups. In the Big 12 matchups against Oklahoma, West Virginia is giving up an average of 42 points per game. So West Virginia is going to have to do a much better job defensively in this one. We saw last year that was a big reason West Virginia was able to, win that contest. They limited the Oklahoma rushing offense, made them one-dimensional. Of course, they possessed the football a lot in offense, and we're going to expect West Virginia to do just that. And hopefully West Virginia is able to, kind of repeat what they did last year a little bit on the defensive side, as far as they don't really want to get into a shootout with Oklahoma, I think, in this game. Not to say that West Virginia can't win if it's a shootout. I'll have you more on that here in a minute when we talk about West Virginia's offense against the Oklahoma defense. But obviously, I think ideally for West Virginia, they want to first and foremost stop the Oklahoma rushing offense, make them one-dimensional, but you worry about that. This is, for me, the key matchup in the game is Oklahoma's passing offense against West Virginia's passing defense, because West Virginia's secondary has done a good job this season. We know they lack depth there, though, so that's where you worry, when you get into late in games, especially if it becomes a shootout scenario or something like that, where West Virginia's defense has to defend a lot of snaps. You want to try and minimize that snap count, have them, get as low as possible. West Virginia's been doing a good job of that this season. Hopefully they can continue that against an explosive Oklahoma offense. But for West Virginia, their defense has done a good job in the secondary. Actually, they lead the country in ball hawk rate according to PFF, which means they're breaking up a lot of passes defended, and good interceptions there as well. So West Virginia's secondary has played well this season. The lack of depth there does concern you, but also what concerns you is when you look at Oklahoma, just the weapons that they have across the board. You wonder if they're going to be able to find a matchup that they like. When you have 3 different receivers that I mentioned there, and of course they still have good tight end and Stogner. They have different weapons they can utilize there in the passing game, and of course you still have to account for Dylan Gabriel's legs as well. Beanie Bishop's been fantastic, but you think if Oklahoma chooses to spread West Virginia out and try and attack through the air consistently throughout this game, you wonder if they're going to be able to find a matchup they can pinpoint. Maybe it's Drake Stoops in the slot against some of West Virginia's linebackers, something like that does concern me in this game, and I worry about it turning into a shootout because of those things. But if West Virginia can find a way to, consistently slow down the Oklahoma offense by stopping the run, forcing them into obvious passing downs, getting ahead in the chains, I think, having good success on first downs would be key for West Virginia in this contest defensively, force Oklahoma into some second and longs and some third and longs to where they're not going to have a high conversion rate on those conversion downs, because that's one way that West Virginia was able to beat the Sooners last year as well, as Oklahoma did not convert hardly any third or fourth downs because West Virginia kept them behind the chains a lot. Hopefully the Mountaineers are able to repeat that and do that again this season. If so, it would be a good formula for them, because Oklahoma does have some explosiveness on that offense, especially when it comes to the passing attack. So West Virginia is going to have to do a good job on those early downs and on stopping the run to be able to, not let this get to a shootout, because it certainly could, and I'm concerned that it might because of Oklahoma's explosiveness in the passing game. But hopefully West Virginia's ready and willing and has a good game plan set up to be able to combat that. But those are kind of my thoughts on that side of the matchup. Let's flip it over and talk a little bit about the Oklahoma defense matching up against the West Virginia offense. And that Oklahoma defense, of course, will be coordinated by Ted Roof now in his second season with the Sooners as well. And he has done a great job of drastically improving that Oklahoma defense this season compared to where it was in 2022. They struggled extremely bad last year on that side of the football, and was one of the reasons Oklahoma had a down season last year. And they have certainly improved it, obviously, on the stat sheet. It looks like right now to this point, as Oklahoma ranked 98th in scoring defense in 2022. Thus far this season, they have brought that all the way up to be a top 30 scoring defense in the country, ranking 27th currently coming into this game. And they're also second nationally with 15 interceptions. So they're doing a great job forcing turnovers this year as well. Defensive back Billy Bowman is a big reason that they're able to do that. He's kind of similar to what Beanie Bishop provides for the Mountaineers. Billy Bowman does that for Oklahoma, and he's a very talented cornerback that we'll see on the field. He leads the team there with 4 interceptions, and they also have Gentry Williams there, who has 3 as far as the Oklahoma players to watch for on the back end. But overall, you're looking at the front half of that defense. You're talking about a guy, Danny Stutzman, there at the linebacker position, led the Big 12 last season in tackles and has done that yet again this year, really returned to form when he's been on the field for the Sooners. Already 73 tackles on the year, and that's despite the fact that he's missed the past couple of games. He's expected to be back and return here to face the Mountaineers, so they will get a more healthy Oklahoma defense that they'll be facing up against. And then, of course, the player to worry about on the front line there for the Oklahoma defense there is Downs, the defensive lineman, was a preseason all-conference selection for the Sooners and has been their best pass rusher, has 4.5 sacks on the year to go along with his 6 TFLs as well. And I mentioned, the Oklahoma defense really improving this season, and, referenced obviously the scoring defense improvement, but this stat really jumped out to me when I looked at, some of their defensive numbers, and that is the fact that the 178 points that they've given up through the first 9 games of this year is the lowest that they've given up through 9 games in a season since all the way back in 2015. So you're talking about an Oklahoma defense playing better than they have in almost a decade, and you kind of expected that when Brent Venables came in. So that's kind of why the setbacks that they had last season and the struggles that they were having, primarily being on the defensive side, was such a surprise. I think this year we're seeing more of the Oklahoma that we can probably expect to see with Brent Venables at the helm, and it's been a lot better defense for them. So we'll see if that continues as they're matched up against a West Virginia offense that has really been hitting their stride here in the past few weeks, obviously. And I think West Virginia can exploit this matchup, despite the fact that it's a much improved Oklahoma defense. we've seen other teams have success running the football, and West Virginia has done a great job of that this season. Obviously, when you're looking at coming off back-to-back games where you've had the most success in that area since way back in 2008, and you ran for over 300 yards last week. West Virginia needs to try and continue that this week against Oklahoma, because I think that that's the one thing that really we have yet to see West Virginia do against an Oklahoma team in Norman, is play great offensively, especially when it comes to rushing the football and, of course, scoring the football. That's something else they've struggled with drastically when they've played at Norman. When they've played Oklahoma on the road there, they've really struggled. WVU hasn't scored more than 14 points in Norman since 2017, scoring 14 back in 2019, and then, of course, 13 back in 2021 when West Virginia put forth a valiant effort and nearly upset the Sooners in a night game in Norman. So, that's one game that a lot of people have been looking to for hope for West Virginia that they can go in there and beat the Sooners, is the fact that the last time they played there in 2021, West Virginia was, a bad snap away from taking a lead there with 5 minutes remaining in the contest. So West Virginia certainly has a chance to play well there again when you look at the fact that West Virginia's team this year compared to the team they had in 2021 looks much better, especially when it comes to rushing the football and when it comes to a weapon like Garrett Green, who's been so successful for West Virginia. Because I went back and looked at that 2021 game and I wondered, did West Virginia actually have success running the ball in that game? Because we knew within the first 2.5, maybe even you could say 3 years of the Neil Brown era, West Virginia really struggled to run the football, even to get 100 yards rushing as a team, because West Virginia has a great overall record in the Neil Brown era when they reach over 100 rushing yards, over 200 rushing yards, and then undefeated when they reach over 300 rushing yards. It had just been few and far between that had happened here until about the past season and a half. And so I went back and looked at that 2021 game, which West Virginia lost on a last-second field goal the last time they played in Norman, 16-13. And in that game, West Virginia only had 247 total yards and only ran the football for 68. So West Virginia's offense certainly seems to be in a much better spot now than it was in that 2021 contest. So that maybe should give you hope if you're a West Virginia fan. And of course, when we think about that game, we think about Garrett Green, I think, because West Virginia got him involved early in the game on their opening drive and kind of got off to a 7-0 lead, which obviously was very important in a game that only, West Virginia scored 13 points in. So people think Garrett Green played a very big part in that game. And obviously he did when he got that one touchdown on that opening possession. But when you go back and look at the numbers, Garrett Green only had 35 total yards in the game. And I believe he only had less than 10 touches in the game. So we're going to see Garrett Green get involved more in this game. That's good to see. And we're going to see a more explosive offense, probably the most explosive offense West Virginia has taken to Norman, certainly in the Neil Brown era anyway. And of course, with Garrett Green at the helm, you never know what can happen. And Garrett Green's the only West Virginia quarterback that has defeated Oklahoma as well. Let's not forget that. So those are just some signs of positivity, some kind of hope I'm trying to put into this matchup when we're looking at the West Virginia offense going up against the Oklahoma defense, because the Oklahoma defense has been pretty good this season, especially in the second half of football games. So if you're circling a quarter to watch, maybe circle the third quarter of this game, because Oklahoma's defense in the second half has been phenomenal throughout most of this season. It's kind of been their calling card. On average, they've only given up 7.8 points per game in the second half this season. They've held two teams to under 100 total yards in the second half of football games, and they've only allowed one third quarter touchdown the entire season. So watch West Virginia against this Oklahoma defense in the third quarter and see what happens. Maybe circle back to that one at the end of the game and see how West Virginia did, if they come out on top of this one or vice versa. We'll see how it looks, but certainly should be an interesting matchup, as both of these units are very improved compared to where they were last season and when these two teams have matched up in recent years. This is one of the strongest Oklahoma defenses, it looks like, on paper that West Virginia will face, and it's definitely in the Neil Brown era the most explosive West Virginia offense that Oklahoma will face as well. So should be a fun matchup to watch on that side as well. So now that we've broken down the matchups a little bit, both on offense and defense, let's get into it here. Time for the fun portion of these preview podcasts always. And of course, that's where we get to share our key to victory and our score prediction here on episode 179 of the CRW podcast. All right, leading it off here, key to victory. And this is one where it's just kind of one of those weeks where I went with something intangible because I think there's a lot of different areas you can look to in this game. I talked about some of them, talked about West Virginia, having to limit the Oklahoma explosiveness on their offense, West Virginia needing to, have success rushing the football, which is something they haven't done a great job of playing in Norman. So obviously those go into the game, but I think it's a little bit more of an intangible that I'm going to use as my key to victory overall this week. I think to beat the Sooners, you have to bring the energy this week. Who wants it more? It's a bit of an intangible factor that I think is going to affect this football game. West Virginia's coming into this game off of 2 straight wins. Oklahoma's coming into this game off of 2 straight losses. Both teams are hoping to remain within the Big 12 conference title race. For Oklahoma, they're going to be pissed off probably. Let's just look at it the way that it is. Not only are they coming off of 2 straight losses after a year in which they started 7-0, we're potentially looking at the college football playoffs and a Heisman candidate quarterback. They also just lost what will likely be the final Bedlam game, and they're coming back home to play a night game. So West Virginia should expect an Oklahoma team to come out with a pissed off type of energy, come out really firing on all cylinders and wanting to, play their best football. So in turn, West Virginia is going to have to match that. Not only do you have to do that already when you're playing on the road, but I think you really have to increase that, turn that up to 11, if you will. West Virginia has to bring the energy, matches Oklahoma's energy, and want it just as bad. And not only do they have to want it just as bad, they have to want it more if they want to come out victorious in this football game. And, we looked back a few weeks earlier, we were talking on this preview show that West Virginia had a game against Oklahoma State that I kind of tabbed the contender or pretender game because it was a game where both of those two teams were competing to, kind of have the inside track to the Big 12 conference title game. Unfortunately, Oklahoma State came out on top of that one. Now West Virginia will need a little help down the line, but West Virginia can now remain in that race still with the win over Oklahoma in this game. So it's almost like yet again here a few weeks later against another Oklahoma school, you get another, here we are, contender or pretender game, and West Virginia has a chance to, make up for their mistake earlier in their contender-pretender game when they lost to the Cowboys. Now they can go on the road and beat the Sooners, get Neil Brown a signature win. So they certainly should have plenty of factors to motivate in this game, and they should be energized for this game, but they have to bring that energy. They have to want it more. So that's my key to victory for this game against Oklahoma. Now, do I think they'll be able to do it? It's time. It's that time. It's prediction time. Let's get into it here. I talked a little bit in the matchups about something that worries me, and that certainly does worry me. That's the Oklahoma offense, going up against this West Virginia passing defense. Despite the fact that West Virginia has made plays there, Beanie Bishop's been, an absolute bright spot for that unit. West Virginia, as I said, leading the nation in ball hawk rate, doing a great job forcing turnovers, breaking up passes. They're going to have to go out and really showcase that, and they got a chance to prove that on a national stage against one of the nation's best offenses here and one of the nation's best quarterbacks in Dylan Gabriel as well. And so that matchup certainly worries me a little bit looking at this game, and I think that this game could turn into a shootout because of that. But the bright spot that I have is that I think this West Virginia offense is unlike any other that Oklahoma has faced in this Neil Brown era. And they're going to be looking at this Neil Brown era expecting to dominate this West Virginia offense because thus far, as I've said, especially in Norman, they've done just that. So I think the Oklahoma defense is going to come out confident and cocky as they should. West Virginia hasn't scored more than 14 points in Norman since 2017. But also, West Virginia should be motivated by that offensively. They've got a statement to make. They should come out in this game, and if it does turn into a shootout, they should be able to go out and not only compete in that, but they should be able to come out and win a shootout in Norman. And that's what I'm hoping to speak into existence here with my prediction. I think that Neil Brown's done a great job motivating this football team this week. You heard him mention in his radio show the fact that West Virginia hasn't won in Norman since 1982. I feel like he's probably driving that home pretty heavily. I think that West Virginia is going to be a team that comes out energized, and I think they are going to want it more. To go back to my key to victory, I think that it might turn into a shootout. That's what I've got happening here in my prediction. Unfortunately, I hope that I'm wrong and the West Virginia defense comes out and proves me wrong and performs well, and West Virginia wins it in another way. But I'm expecting the West Virginia offense to put on a show. I think that this is Garrett Green's, really big coming out party on a national stage. stage. I think among Mountaineer Nation, we've seen him play well this season. We know what we've got with him, but I think everyone else is about to learn in this game against the Sooners. I think he's going to outduel Dylan Gabriel at the end. West Virginia is going to kick a walk-off field goal for the second straight year against Oklahoma, this time in Norman. They're going to win for the first time since 1982 in a shootout. And the last time West Virginia won there, you know how many points they scored? 41. So I'm saying history repeats itself. They're going to score 41 again. West Virginia is going to beat Oklahoma 41-38. That's what I'm predicting for this Saturday night game in Norman. So there you have it, Mountaineer Nation. My golden blue glasses on, certainly in full effect for that optimistic prediction, as West Virginia has the deck stacked against them, 13-point underdogs. ESPN's FPI predictor, giving Oklahoma an 89% chance to win. But we've seen this before, and we've seen it before against the Sooners. So, I'm just hoping that history continues to repeat itself in this one, and West Virginia finds a way to get it done in Norman. And I'm remaining optimistic and trying to will it into existence and speaking it into existence here with those golden blue glasses on. So hopefully I'm correct, but would love to hear how you guys are feeling about this one as well. Drop your thoughts in the comments. Share those with us. We appreciate those interactions as we continue to try and grow the Country Roads Webcast community throughout Mountaineer Nation. But we also have some other predictions to make here. There's some other good games here around the Big 12 Conference in Week 11. So let's take a look at some of those and provide predictions for those as we get set to wrap up our Oklahoma preview and predictions episode here on the Country Roads Webcast by taking a look around the Big 12. All right, final segment here on episode 179 of the CRW podcast. Appreciate you guys tuning into this one, whether you're viewing it or listening. Can't say that enough and stress that enough. We really do appreciate you guys that choose to listen to our content here on the Country Roads Webcast. But full disclosure here for our final segment, honestly, West Virginia and Oklahoma is the best game of the slate this week in the Big 12. Should be the game of the week, but obviously can't pick that for the game of the week. We always have to select another Big 12 game, so just kind of had to choose one here. So our Big 12 game of the week this week is going to be Texas and TCU, so that'll be the final game that we pick here. Other than that, we'll just go through in chronological order the way that they'll happen this Saturday, as it's a full Saturday slate, no weekday games this week. So let's lead it off with the noon game, and that is, of course, Texas Tech heading to Lawrence to take on the Kansas Jayhawks, who are right in the thick of the conference title race this season and doing a phenomenal job. And Lance Leipold, you can't say enough the job that he's done there with the Jayhawks, and I think they're going to continue their winning ways here. They'll beat the Red Raiders, get that win there at noon to start off the slate here in our around the Big 12 segment there. We've got Kansas getting the win. Moving on to our next game, where you'll see Baylor head to the state of Kansas as well for a 3:00 kick there against the Kansas State Wildcats on ESPN+. Baylor really struggling right now. This would be, a monumental upset at this point for them to go in and beat a Kansas State team that really seems like they're hitting their stride at the right time of the season as well. Will Howard's, back to playing some good football. Their offense looks re-energized for the most part. I know they had that loss to Texas, but the second half they really played a lot better than they did in the first half offensively in that football game. So I'm expecting a bounce back here for the Wildcats at home. They'll get it done against Dave Aranda and the Baylor Bears. I've got Kansas State getting the win there, and then Oklahoma State and UCF at 3:30 there on ESPN. Oklahoma State traveling to UCF. We need Oklahoma State to lose. Just be honest here as Mountaineer fans. If we're going to have a chance to reach the conference title game, obviously it's all for nothing if West Virginia doesn't beat the Sooners. But West Virginia needs Oklahoma State to, take L in conference. I think they actually need Oklahoma State to lose 2 more conference games. And obviously the bounce house is a tough place to play. This will be a fun game to watch if you like rushing offense. I think we know UCF, that's kind of what they pride themselves on. Oklahoma State, Ollie Gordon, the best running back in the country, in my opinion. So should be a fun matchup to watch there. Right now with this pick, it's obviously another one where I'm trying to be a bit superstitious and will it into existence. I'm going to go with the upset. Let's pick UCF to beat Oklahoma State. I've picked a couple upsets the past couple of weeks here on the Around the Big 12 segment, and I'm about 50-50 on them. So let's hope that this is going in the right 50% side and not the wrong 50% side for the Mountaineers, and maybe we'll be able to speak another one into existence here. Let's say UCF at home gets re-energized. They're coming off their first conference win finally. They'll probably have a good crowd there with a ranked Oklahoma State team coming in. Should be a good atmosphere. Let's say that that's enough to give them a slight advantage, and they do just enough to beat Oklahoma State. But I'll be honest, guys, it's a long shot. We know that the UCF rushing defense has struggled a lot this season. Ollie Gordon's really good. Obviously, my head and my gut are saying Oklahoma State's probably going to win this game, but the Mountaineer fan and the golden blue glasses I'm wearing here on episode 179 are saying, let's go Knights. UCF going to get the win. Moving on, of course, we talked about the Mountaineers and the Sooners at 7 o'clock on Fox. There's another game going on at 7 o'clock as well. It'll be on FS1, and that is two Big 12 newcomers matching up as Cincinnati hits the road to head to Houston, take on the Fighting Dana Holgersons there. Houston coming off a victory last week where they beat Baylor on a 2-point conversion in overtime. Cincinnati coming off the loss to UCF in what was, a highly competitive football game there as well. So two teams in different places coming into this one. But, I like Cincinnati's defense. I think that they've had times where they've played good this season, and I think they'll find a way to, scheme up Houston and make them one-dimensional enough, get enough stops against Dana to find a way to win this game despite the fact that it's in Houston. I'm going with Cincinnati getting a road win over the Cougars. Cincinnati gets the road win there in that one for me. And then a very late game here as Iowa State has to head to Provo to play BYU, and it's going to be a 10:15 Eastern time kick there. So stay up late if you want to watch this one, Mountaineer fans. It's going to be on ESPN, though. Iowa State, doing a great job this season for the most part. They really have, impressed and I think surprised, especially after everything that happened with them in the offseason, that they've been, right in the thick of the conference race for the majority of this season, especially with their early season upset loss that they suffered. So shout out to Matt Campbell really righting the ship and getting things going back in the right direction for Iowa State. I don't know about BYU status in terms of the injuries, and because of that, and I don't know who they'll have back and who they won't, I'm expecting, obviously, Retzlaff to continue playing quarterback for them. I'm expecting them to play better at home. I think this will be a highly competitive contest. BYU actually has a chance to pull the upset and win this one, I think. But just with those injuries they have going on and not knowing the status of who will be involved and who won't for them, I'm going with Iowa State to beat the Cougars on the road in that late kick there in Provo, which then brings us to our final game here in our Around the Big 12 segment, our game of the week here to wrap up episode 179 of the Country Roads webcast, and that is the Texas Longhorns hitting the road to take on the TCU Horned Frogs in Fort Worth. Their 7:30 kick on ABC, nationally televised game there. And I'd love to pick TCU to pull the upset. Playing at home, they're obviously going to probably pull out all the stops for this one to try and beat Texas. Obviously, everyone that's, staying in the Big 12 conference doesn't want to see Texas reach the Big 12 title game like it looks like they're going to. So they're potentially going to get everyone's best shot that they line up against over these final few weeks. But just with what we've seen from TCU this season, I just don't think they've got enough to get it done, just to be quite honest with you. I'd love to see them do it. I'm going to be pulling for TCU, but Texas is just going to be too much for them, especially with the news that it looks like Quinn Ewers is going to be returning for the Longhorns. I think Texas will go into Fort Worth and get the win there, beat TCU in our game of the week here to wrap up our Around the Big 12 segment here on episode 179 of the Country Roads webcast. All right, Mountaineer Nation. So that will pretty much get ready to wrap us up here on Season 6, Episode 179 of the Country Roads webcast. Really appreciate you guys for tuning into this one. We've dove in on the matchups against the Sooners, provided our key to victory and score predictions, as well as some predictions for these games going on in Week 11 here around the Big 12, and excited to watch some of those. But most importantly and most excited for the Mountaineers to play a night game in Norman and hopefully put on a good performance in Norman and put on some more offense than they have in their recent performances there against the Sooners. And I'm expecting this to be a really fun contest, and hopefully we're talking about a monumental West Virginia victory following that contest. But nonetheless, we'll be back to talk about it with you guys immediately following its conclusion. You can catch us hosting the Voice of College Football post-game show on the West Virginia Voice of College Football channel and the Big 12 Voice of College Football channel, and we'll post exactly when and where that will be and links to it on our social media. So be sure, check us out there if you don't already. You can find us on X at WVU Country Roads, and then we're just Country Roads Webcast, both on Facebook and Instagram. And of course, we'll be back here with our Oklahoma review and reaction podcast there towards the end of the weekend as well. So you can be on the lookout for that on our channel, on all podcast platforms as well. And of course, on the web there at wvsportsnow.com, where you can find our show and a ton of great Mountaineer sports content that you should definitely check out. And hopefully Saturday night, we'll all be checking out a West Virginia win. Nonetheless, we look forward to talking about it and talking about the final few weeks of what is a very successful West Virginia football season here in 2023 that currently sees the Mountaineers sitting at 6-3 overall and 4-2 in the Big 12 conference. And hopefully they'll come away adding a W in each of those columns following this game against the Sooners Saturday night. But we're certainly looking forward to it, and we know all of you all are as well. Having said that, as always, I'm Jordan Cruz, and until next time, let's go
If you
Mountaineers.
really want to know, then come on, let's go. Take a stroll down those